another great showing tonight. So thank y'all for being here. I've got a couple of quick things to say at the beginning. One is I wanted to, you've heard a whole lot from me in the last week. I was here last week and talked about some land management things. And I wanted to give a couple quick updates because some stuff's changing pretty quick. There are a couple of areas I wanted to highlight, like where Pole Creek comes into Spring Island Drive on the south end of the island. There is a lot of brown and dying stuff that you'll see right along the road. Some of that is sweet gum. Now, we talked last time, sweet gum's native, but it can go a little crazy and we have to push it back into submission. That area also has the non-native wisteria vine. And as I learned, the beginning of Pole Creek is kind of open, and that's because that used to be dominated by wisteria. They had to go in a big way and clear that out. So there's a little bit that's on the other side of the road there. So you'll see some brown out stuff. That's part of the process. There was some work done also on sweet gums and tallow at the duck ponds, especially what we call units 7 and 8, the southwest corner, right along Spring Island Drive. Some of those have been girdled. Some of them are just going to get removed here soon, but you'll see some changes happening there. If any of you have played golf in the last few days, you'll notice that Jay and his crew already went out in the area by hole 15 looking towards Cubby Rise. They've already knocked that back, and so now we can get that into this sort of contiguous grassland setup, which is a cool thing. So a nice work with Jay's crew. The deer management team wraps up tonight. That's the end of the season, so Venison Appreciation Night's coming up soon. And then the tree sale is going on. Hopefully, everybody's calendars are getting a little crazy right now. And I point this out because we had 400 trees delivered here recently. And there is some really outstanding looking material in there. There's 4 in my car because they're going to my house. But there's some really good stuff. And if you have any concerns about nature curtains and visibility at your place, remember we talked last time, and if you saw Basil Camus talk, like plant into your nature curtains to add some short stuff for the next tier of growth. And Matt is doing a session on Friday where you can just drop by and say, here's where I live and here's what I need to fill a gap, and he can help you out with that. So please take advantage of that tree sale. Next week, I can't even highlight all the stuff, and a lot of stuff sold out already. It's gone pretty crazy. Every non-Thanksgiving day, weekday, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, there's a 10 a.m. something for kids at the Nature Center. Creature feature, animal feeding, something like that. Those are optional RSVPs, but those are way too fun. So we'll be seeing a lot of each other over the next week and a half. I also want to announce what's happening for the last Trust Talk of this season. So the Trust Talk Committee is really excited about putting together this program, which is going to be on December 11th, so our final session, not that far from now. And this is an event in celebration of the 35th anniversary of the start of Spring Island's modern era. It's going to be a panel of longtime Spring Island members. It's going to be hosted by Betsy Chafin, and she and the others are going to talk about what Spring Island's growth and changes have meant to them. So it'll be a very personal set of stories. Should be great. Instead of coming here at 5:30, you're going to come here at 5:15 because there's going to be hors d'oeuvres that are related to some of the history of Spring Island and things that are very low country. So lots and lots going on, and that includes a busy evening tonight, and so I'm really pleased to get to introduce our speaker. I think many of you already know Dean. Dean has had a major presence here in the region for quite a while. He was the general manager of the Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer Authority for 25 years. He retired in 2011, and upon his retirement was recognized with the state's highest civilian honor, the Order of the Palmetto. He's been here to see tremendous change. I've been here 3 years and I've seen tremendous change. He has a much more impressive narrative to share about has changed here and how that's impacted water quality and a great many other things. In addition to that direct work, he's been involved with a whole bunch of nonprofits and other important groups. He's been chairman of the Savannah River Maritime Commission, which represents South Carolina's interest in the River Channel, jointly owned by South Carolina and Georgia. He was the founder and volunteer executive director of the Friends of the Spanish Moss Trail. He's the former board chair of the Port Royal Sound Foundation. He's actively involved in Open Land Trust, and he sits on the South Carolina board for the Nature Conservancy. So please join me in welcoming Dean Moss.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and talk to you about some things that I've been thinking about. It was quite an interesting process to put this together because it involved lots of things that I have not thought about very much for about 20 years. But I'm going to just talk a little bit about how I got here, and then I'm going to spend some time on the history of, particularly of growth and development, particularly from the water and sewer perspective. And then I'm going to focus in on the nonprofits that he mentioned, basically Open Land Trust, Port Royal Sound Foundation, and the Nature Conservancy. But thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. How'd I get here? After 4 years in the Navy, and I was in Vietnam in 1968 on the ground in Da Nang, I was discharged in 1972. And I went and completed my undergraduate degree at the University of Denver. Went there to ski, basically. And then I completed a master's degree in regional planning at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Just about that time, a little before that, the Clean Water Act amendments of 1972 passed, and the ESSEC kind of started implementing them. And when that happened, it created an enormous number of jobs in the water field. And I got one of them in Brevard County, Florida. I went to work for the county, basically doing very simple planning stuff. They had just brought in, decided they were going to get what's called a 201 grant, which was the monies necessary to build wastewater treatment plants. Huge amount of money that came forward with that from the feds. After that, I went to Arizona and worked on that kind of thing up in the northern part of Arizona, north of Flagstaff, in an area that included the Navajo Reservation, the Hopi Reservation, White Mountain Apaches, the Grand Canyon, everything in kind of northern Arizona. I was doing water planning in that area. And then back to North Carolina. I have friends here, had friends here in Beaufort, and I got a phone call saying, we've got this job, would you be interested in it? Which was the general manager of Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer Authority. And I said, sure, I'd love it, great, because I love this area anyway. And that was in basically June of 1986. I never run a utility. Boy, was I about to learn some things. Now, before me, and I'm going to talk about what happened before I got here, because I think a lot of it's very important. Groundwater was the principal water supply for everybody in the county, everybody in the region. No surface water was being pumped, no surface water was being treated or used. There wasn't a huge number of people here, but there was a lot of groundwater. One of the places where the groundwater was critical and important was Parris Island. And this is about 1913, beginning of World War I. And the Marine Corps had moved in there, and they were setting it up, and they basically started a process of training the first recruits for World War I at Parris Island. Now, what nobody knew, and now we do, but what we didn't know then, is that the aquifer that we get our water from, the salt, the groundwater comes out of, is limestone, and it's very deep in the ground. Relatively shallower here than as you go south towards Savannah, but still 100 feet down. Above that ground, that limestone aquifer is what we call basically a confining layer, which is a fairly thick, say 100 feet of compressed soil, sand, whatever, and it's just thick and impermeable. So the groundwater is underneath it, and the groundwater is flowing down here from the Columbia area, just south of Columbia, from the Midlands. It's been flowing down in the Florida aquifer down toward the sea forever. Well, what they didn't know was in Port Royal Sound, off of Parris Island, is an area where the confining layer was missing. And surface water, groundwater, would flow up through, up and come out into the salt water. And in the old days, apparently, that was sufficient that sailing ships would come in, anchor, and be able to take fresh water and fill their water supply with fresh water pushing itself up. So nobody really understood that at all. Why or what was happening? Well, what happens when the Marine Corps started doing the training? They had a huge number of people there, and they had to have water, and they drilled wells, and they pumped the hell out of it. And what then happened was they reduced the pressure of the pressure of the flow of the groundwater welling up, which then caused the salt water to flow down. And that started a process which now has resulted in the wells of Hilton Head being salted. And that process has gone on for 100 years, more than 100 years. Of slowly but surely, that salt water working its way down through the Florida aquifer to the south and to the southwest. So that kind of started a process. The Marine Corps pumped as hard as they could. They got through World War I. They realized they were going to have to do something. So in World War II, they came off Parris Island with a pipeline right where the road is right now that goes to Parris Island, and worked all the way up what is now Parris Island Gateway, and drilled a whole series of wells up that road, and that water supply was pumped down to Parris Island and served during World War II. After World War II, it became obvious that they weren't having enough and they had to have more. The air station basically had been developed and was pumping groundwater. They built a pipeline up into the area now known as Burton Wells and brought water down, more water down. But by 1955, they came to the Beaufort community, and basically in those days that's what there was. There wasn't anything out here. There wasn't really anything to speak of on Hilton Head. Bluffton was there as a small community, but Beaufort was where the action was because it was the county seat and the most prosperous community in the county. And they said, unless we get some water from someplace else, we're going to have to close Parris Island. So that started a process which has led us to today. A guy named Joab Dowling, who was an attorney in Beaufort, the Dowling Law Firm, which some of you may have heard of in the old days, and a guy named Paul Schwartz, who was a businessman there, decided they needed to do something. They worked with the general in Parris Island and figured out what it should be. So they headed up to Washington, and they would bring boxes of shrimp, crab meat, oysters, and Mendel Rivers, who was a South Carolina congressman, was chair of the House Armed Services Committee. And he would take them around to members of the House Armed Services Committee, and they'd walk into the office and put the box of shrimp on the desk, and they'd tell their story. And after about 5 times, 6 times of doing that over a period of probably 6 to 8, 10 months, Mendel calls and says, we're okay, we got it. We got the votes we need. Because what they were looking for was money to fix the problem. We have to do something about it. We know what we need to do, but we need money to do it. And the Armed Services Committee said, we're okay, we're going to give you money. But Dowling said to Mendel Rivers, he says, well, what about the Senate? And Mendel Rivers says, Scoop Jackson is intending to build an enormous Navy facility in the Seattle area. No problem. We can handle it. because Scoop needed his votes in order to get that done. So that started a process of providing money. The military gave the Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer Water Authority was created. It didn't become the Sewer Authority for a while, but the Beaufort Jasper Water Authority was created, established by state legislature. So we are an independent utility. We were not formed by the county. We were formed by the state legislature. And it made a loan. The feds made a loan of $2 million to the Beaufort Water Authority, Beaufort County Water Authority, and then they went to the bank, went to the bond market and got another $2 million, $2.5 million in a revenue bond. That process started the design and construction of the Beaufort water system, water supply system, which involved going to the Savannah River, identifying where they were going to pump the water, bringing in an entry canal from the river to a point where they could put in a big pump station, and then constructing a canal that came all the way essentially from the Savannah River all the way down to basically the corner of the road and 170 up here. And then they built the water plant, and they built then pipelines which carried that water into Beaufort. And those, if you know, with the Port Royal Sound Foundation, that water line went right smack through what the parking lot is now. Under the river, there was no bridge. The bridges, they didn't use the bridges, they just took the pipelines under the river. Into Beaufort, they built a 1.5 million gallon elevated storage tank along 170, which is still there, which you see, and connected up the military and ultimately connected up the city. Treatment plant construction was underway, 1963, and there were all kinds of people here. Both senators from Washington, legislators, other people. Kennedy gets shot on that day. And everybody evaporates. Helicopters fly them off to go back to Washington. So service begins in 1965. Beaufort and Port Royal close their wells. Service begins to Parris Island, to the air station, the Naval Hospital. It's all wholesale. Beaufort Water and Sewer Authority is a wholesale water provider. And that contract that Beaufort had entered into gave Beaufort, City of Beaufort, the right to serve retail anywhere they wanted. So the Water Authority could not serve retail unless Beaufort allowed them to. That ended up in a lawsuit that we'll get to in a minute. 75, water was put into Burton area, into Ladies Island, onto St. Helena. Beaufort Jasper had the retail, particularly on Ladies Island, but the Water Authority ended up having the retail out on St. Helena and up at the upper parts of Ladies Island and out in Burton, because the city just didn't want to have to deal with that. There were at the same time created in the next several years small groundwater systems serving Bluffton, and there were a series of small groundwater systems built for communities, mostly African American communities, on Hilton Head, based upon the federal money that was available, particularly from the Johnson administration. There was a lot of these types of operations that went on. And then in 1983, along comes Datoff out on St. Helena, and they drive the first treatment plant expansion. The same time, from the same area, Kalawasi had shown up and bought water, and so a pipeline was sent down to Kalawasi, which is the one that Spring now taps into, and on the wholesale. So y'all are not directly customers of Beaufort Jasper on the retail side, but you are on the wholesale side. And so in 1986, I become general manager. In Beaufort County in 1986 was very different than it is now, which many of you know. It was very quiet. And you could really drive between Beaufort and Hilton Head, and mostly what you saw was trees. There really wasn't anything going on, because you guys, lots of stuff was off the road maybe, but you didn't see, there was no significant commercial, there was no traffic, it was 2-lane roads. It was very simple. So that's kind of how the water business got started here. The wastewater business, on the other side, the city of Beaufort, in about 1976, again, the Clean Water Act passed in about 63, 64, and grants started to be made available. Up to the point that this started to happen, there were no wastewater treatment plants serving the municipalities of Beaufort and Port Royal. So and there was a city there. There'd been a city in that spot for 300 years. Guess where the wastewater went? Just right into the river. So, and there were great stories about friends of mine that I talked to that said, we used to flush ping pong balls down the toilet, and then we'd all run out to the beach, and to what is now Waterfront Park, and watch the water ball, watch the pop out. That had been going on for 300 years. So there were also Paris Island had a treatment plant, and the air station had a treatment plant. So they were discharging treated wastewater into the rivers, but Beaufort and Port Royal were not. DOTOC put us in the wastewater, put Beaufort Jasper in the wastewater business. The city did not want to get into the wastewater business. They wanted the water, they didn't want to have the wastewater. So DOTOC funded a small wastewater treatment plant which is really in St. Helena, very close to DOTOC, and in 1987. And the wastewater from that wastewater plant went to DOTOC onto their golf courses, which is how many of your golf courses here are irrigated, at least with some wastewater. To protect St. Helena from more golf courses, which was a real issue in those days, southern Beaufort County was exploding. And the concern was, what's going to happen? Are we going to get these massive developments on St. Helena? Because there was a huge amount of available land, all cleared, which was being used for farming. Are we going to end up with these huge developments? And at the request of the community and support of the county, we said we're not expanding wastewater lines anywhere else in St. Helena other than to the elementary school and to Penn Center. And that still provides today. That's the way it is today. Wastewater lines have not been extended out beyond those facilities. In southern Beaufort County, sewage disposal, there was no surface water discharge allowed. The state had stopped any surface water discharge of wastewater at the very beginning. So the treatment plants that were built, and there were 3 on Hilton Head, still there, all disposed of on golf courses. Or there are some now new things that are going on in terms of treating, injecting, and pulling out and retreating. And there's all kinds of stuff going on there right now. But the process has kind of come to the point now where it's time to start dealing more broadly. 1990s to the present. Beaufort County explodes. And at 1995, roughly, Union Camp Corporation came to meet with me at the Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer Authority. And this guy came, his friend, we'd known him for a long time. He rolls a map out on the table, and they owned the land basically from the edge of Bluffton all the way to 95. All that land going out that way was all Union Camp property. And he said, we're going to stop growing trees and start growing houses. And that's kind of how it started, 95. And Del Webb started the assault. They were really the first ones in the door. And they came in and explained what they were going to do. And by that time, we had established a position, which we'd started at DOTOC, that said, if you want water and sewer, and you're a developer, you're going to pay up front X dollars per gallon of capacity that you want, whether it is water or sewer. You're going to write us a check, and we have to clear that check and have it in the bank before we're going to give you a commitment, because they had to have a commitment for us before they could go any further, because DHEC, State environmental agency, had to approve everything they did. And they would not approve anything without a certification from us that the capacity was available to serve. So that process started, and Del Webb basically wrote us a check, and I can't even remember what it was for. It was probably $8 or $9 million. If we did it today, it'd be $25 million. But they did, basically, and we took those dollars and started building pipeline and built a big wastewater plant kind of in southern Beaufort County, which is still there and working. If you turn like you were going to 278, cut to 278 and up to 95, it's up on your right, back up in the woods there. But it's a very high-tech plant when we put it in. It's very high-tech, tertiary treatment, and it was basically then effluent pumped back down to Bluffton for disposal on their golf courses. Bluffton starts to annex, and they started with Palmetto Bluff and annexed that, and then developers figured out if we go to Bluffton and get them to annex us, then we can get a lot more density, and that's what happened, and that's what's been happening and happening and happening and happening. The traffic and development starts to become overwhelming in southern Beaufort County, and most of this is not happening in northern Beaufort County. Northern Beaufort County is still pretty quiet, and is still kind of quiet. Not quiet enough for me, but still quiet. And then I talked about how the groundwater was contaminated, and just about 1993, 94, 95, all of a sudden the wells in Hilton Head start to go bad. The salt water gets there, and the wells stop. So they come to us and say, we need water in Hilton Head. And so a huge pipeline was constructed through up 278, across the river, under the river, basically, onto Hilton Head. And contracts were signed with the 2 of the 3 utilities. The line was signed so it could accommodate everybody, but the folks at the south end of Hilton Head don't want to do that. So they were happy with their groundwater, and they were still, 30 years away from having their wells contaminated, because it doesn't move that fast. It's starting to happen now, though. In the same time period, we developed what was called aquifer storage and recovery, which is a technology which you basically, and we were in a beautiful place for it. The aquifer under us was pretty clean. You put a well in, and you pump treated surface water into that aquifer, and you store it. And you can store 100 million gallons. In the wintertime, when the demands are down, you've got this capacity to pump, you've got this capacity to treat. You pump that water down, and it spreads out. And in the summer, when you need it, you pump it back out again. And run it through disinfection, and bang, you've got water. That we did 1, and now there have been 2 more, so there were 3 here in Beaufort County. At the same time, a brand new water treatment plant was constructed on the Savannah River. So water comes out of the Savannah River, and major pipelines were built, taking you down through Jasper County and over, connecting with the lines that go into Bluffton and Hilton Head. So there are 2 water plants now that serve this region. At the same time, we've got this thing going on in Beaufort. When we made a commitment to serve Sun City, Beaufort said, wait a minute, we've got this contract dating back to 1963 that gives us the right to serve anybody we want, and we haven't given you permission to serve Sun City. So they sue us. And we end up ultimately in the Supreme Court of the state of South Carolina, and we beat them. And as a result of that, Beaufort says, we don't want to be in the water and sewer business anymore. So we buy their utility. We bought Port Royal's utility, and we ultimately bought the utilities, or acquired the military bases. So Beaufort Jasper now has all the responsibility for delivering water to all the military bases, plus all the potential folks who were customers of the city of Beaufort, and pretty much everywhere else off of Hilton. We sell it wholesale to you, and we sell it wholesale to Fripp Island, for example. but in general, most of the folks out there are on the Beaufort Jasper service line. Sewering of Ladies Island starts and goes ahead, and so a majority of the property on Ladies Island, all the center parts of Ladies Island, are provided sewer. Initially, that sewer was pumped out to St. Helena, and we started to have to deal with acquiring more storage capacity, more areas to discharge the sewage. Now it comes a pipeline, major pipeline, comes underneath the Beaufort River and flows to the new big treatment plant on Port Royal Island. We're still trying to deal with Sun City doesn't have enough effluent now, so I've been helping them try to figure out how to solve that problem. And now at the same time, here we are, and Jasper County is now beginning to explode, just the way Beaufort County did. I'm going to divert a little bit to talk about the Savannah River, because it's an incredible resource. It is a high quality, it's drought resistant, and the good thing about it is it's controlled from a series of like 5 reservoirs that go all the way up to the North Carolina line. The Corps of Engineers has 3 of them, huge reservoirs along the Savannah River Basin, and they control the flow. So even during the most serious droughts we've had here in Beaufort County and in South Carolina, and we've had some serious droughts, the flows have always been there. They've always kept the flow going, so we never had a concern about whether our water supply was going to run out. One thing about the Savannah River, though, is that one of the largest property owners adjacent to the Savannah River is the federal government. And they have the Savannah River site, which, when it was constructed in the early 60s, after World War II, it had 5 nuclear reactors on it. Small ones, not huge, but small ones. They were making all kinds of stuff for bombs. They were making lots of, it was an incredible place. And as a result, there has always been, and had always been, a certain amount of tritium which kind of seeped its way into the river. It was always a very low level, and according to all the scientists and all the doctors and everybody that testified, oh, it's no problem. Don't worry about it. Little radioactivity, good for your stomach. But what happened in about 1989 was that they were trying to start, they closed the old reactors down in the 80s, early 80s. And they tried to start another one up. And something happened and they had a major release of tritium contaminated, highly contaminated water into the Savannah River. And luckily it was in the winter, so demand was low. And we work with the city of Savannah, which also gets its water out of the Savannah River, to work with the federal government to track in precise detail the tritium levels in the river as it flowed down toward us. And we were prepared, and before the stuff got to us, we filled everything up and shut everything down until it had slid by. And it worked, because the demand at the wintertime was low, and we had stored an enormous amount of water wherever we could. And so that's the one. I got my picture in the New York Times. But other things happened on the river. In 2005, there was the attempt to build a joint port. Now, Savannah's port is on that side of the river, on the Savannah side of the river, but there's huge parcels which have historically been dumps for dredged oil on the South Carolina side. And the governors met and talked about it and decided we were going to do a joint port. And I was at a meeting of the governors down there, standing next to the river, and I forget who the governor in Georgia was at the time, but Sanford was the governor in South Carolina, and these guys exchanged ties. They took, which preserves that scenic drive as you drive down toward the city. in the town. The first executive director was a woman named Cindy Baisden, who's still with us and been a good friend for years. And there have been many other projects that have been done, some in Beaufort, and all around, mostly in the old days, north of the Broad. Out on St. Helena, on Ladies Island, properties that were available and were acquired, or people wanted to donate to the trust. We've gone through a sort of. The current executive director is Kristen Williams, and I think many of you know her. She's fabulous. And what the Open Land Trust has done now, they've basically they ran the Rural and Critical Lands program for Beaufort County. And they did that successfully over a period of about 12 years. And they were paid to do that, which was very helpful and very useful. Just the two things that are of interest, I think you know what this are. The first project that the Rural and Critical Lands Board paid for was preservation of large portions of Lemon Island. And the last project they paid for was the Widgeon Point project, which is the project on your right. If you go into Beaufort, just before you get to the big bridge, there was a driveway that went up in there, and you saw for sale signs on that for years. That was the last piece of property using rural and critical lands funds that were done, and the Land Trust did that. The rural and critical lands program is dead. It's been superseded by the program that the voters approved, $100 million for the acquisition and the preservation work that's going on now. OLT, the Open Land Trust, has preserved over 37,000 acres in 7 counties here. Very strong partnerships with the military, particularly, working with them with monies that the military now has available, which seem to still be there, to do acquisitions. And military was involved in I can't remember my name here. Getting old, I can't remember anything.
Gregory.
If it's written down, I don't have it. Gregory Neck, a big chunk of money from the military for Gregory Neck, and a chunk of money for Chelsea. So they've been very, very helpful, because the planes fly over these properties, and they don't want development there. People complain about the flights. So basically, they've got the military, they've got the Nature Conservancy, they've got both counties, they've got other local and state conservation groups. And so there's an enormous amount of energy that goes on. They've been there 50 years, and they're still going strong. I served as chairman of that board for three times in the years past. For the Port Royal Sound Foundation, it was created in 2011 by 2 Spring Island residents, Dick Stewart and Mike Long. I got on that board. I got on that board when it was established, and it is dedicated to education about, research into, and the conservation of the Port Royal Sound. Those 3 ideas, and we're still working those ideas strongly. All of them are intensive. The number of children that have been brought out there to our operation, which you all know where it is, I don't have a number. Madam Executive Director, how many?
Thousands.
Thousands.
Tens of thousands.
Thousands of children. And we are working right now. The Port Royal Sound is one of the most pristine watersheds on the east coast of the United States. There's no question about that. And if you go from the bridge north, the big bridge north, the amount of development up there is minuscule compared to it, and we're trying to keep it that way. The watershed in the high country above 95 that drains in is essentially woodland. It's all woodland. And a lot of it is honey plantations, which we're trying to encourage more honey plantations, obviously. The plantations along the edge, and I'm going to get more to this when I get to the Nature Conservancy. Jody Hayward is our executive director, and she is the best. And we have we're making incredible progress, particularly with the new South Carolina State Environmental Agency, Department of Environmental Services. We have developed a great relationship with them, with their executive director. They have provided us an enormous amount of information that's never seen the light of day. I mean, there were decades of water quality data that had been collected in this region that had never been made public. And so we have acquired it all. And we are integrating that slowly but surely into a very significant piece of work that we're doing, which I'm going to get to in just a second. I was chairman of the Port Royal Sound Foundation for 8 years. Got thrown off last year. But we have a close relationship with Spring Island, very close with Spring Island. We have incredible relationship with the counties and with the other environmental groups. We serve as a gathering place because we have a building. Most of the other environmental groups are roaming around, they're here, there, everywhere, but we have a place right in the center of things where they can come, they can meet, and we do. We try to pull all the environmental groups together into one spot. Try to do once a quarter. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes we do it more quickly. But that's our objective, to get them all together, get them talking, all of them together at the same time. We've now established the Port Royal Sound, or PR Sound, Science Initiative. And it's a significant focus on creating a serious and accurate water quality database for the entire Port Royal Sound watershed. As I said, all the data that had been collected had never been viewed, never been put out, never been compared, never been looked at. So we have mapped the watershed using USGS designations of small sections, all numbered. We have water, we know where the water quality has been collected, we know where it hasn't been collected. And so we are working slowly but surely to build that database. And the first piece is now pretty much in place. We have a full draft of what we want this thing to look like. We've established the first approved citizen water quality data collection program in the state. Water quality data now being collected by the citizens all across the Port Royal Sound watershed. So we get citizens in, and some of you may be involved in this. We train them, and we're certified. Now, DHEC, and they can't use this data for enforcement, but they can use it for analysis, for science, for anything where we need to know. And we have identified where we know what was going on and where we don't. And so the water quality sampling program is now being directed carefully at the places where we don't have the data we need. The next question and the next challenge, basically, is how do we get Beaufort and Jasper County to come to grips with the idea that, and they approve a development, or they approve a subdivision, or they approve something, that these are impacted. And how do they take that data and use it in their decision-making process so that we can develop a much better relationship? There's so much to do, and our fundraising effort goes on. You have been very, very generous to us at Spring Island. Thank you so much for that. Finally, the Nature Conservancy. And obviously it's committed to land protection in South Carolina, but especially in Beaufort and Jasper counties. We are the focal point, and have been the focal point of their efforts in South Carolina for about 2 or 3 years. Chelsea is, a key example of what it took to get that is a function which I could point to Dan and Marty Boone as being the drivers of the work we had to do, because all of a sudden the federal money that we had been counting for, the money that we've been counting for from the World Nature Conservancy, got chopped off because of the things that were happening in Washington. So we were ready to close this thing, and we were, $5 million short. We were short a bunch of money. And we were able to use folks from here, a lot of folks from here, be very, very generous to us, to the Nature Conservancy, and we were able to pull the deal off, and so it got preserved. We have 4 board members on the Nature Conservancy from Beaufort County. Marty Boone and Jim Hauser, who used to live here, now in Beaufort. Mark Pippas, who is the newest board member, who lives at Brays Island, and myself. I am the secretary of the board. Why I accepted that, I'm not sure. But we've had incredible victories on Gregory Neck, on Chelsea, and negotiations are constantly underway. I mean, there's conversations going on constantly with property owners all the way up the Sound, from our Nature Conservancy staff in the watershed. We're working with the Marine Corps on shoreline restoration. There's a significant amount of work going on to protect the shorelines at the various military bases along the. And none of this could have happened. The Chelsea project could not have been done without the support of Spring Island. So I want to thank you very much. I mean, this is, I can't even express it. So in conclusion, I'm almost done, so food can start soon. It's been a pretty adventurous 39 years. Frequently challenging, sometimes disappointing, and always interesting. Growth here is unrelenting. A trip to 95 along 278 right now, look and see.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Increasing land protection is the only answer here. We've got to start getting more land under control, into easement, etc. Traffic's out of control. I mean, I had to go to Bluffton last week. I ended up stopped almost down to the Port Royal Sound offices in traffic in the morning trying to get down and out there. And it's going to stay that way unless the voters support the next county attempt at a 1 penny tax, 1% tax. It will continue to get worse and be an unsolvable problem if we don't start doing something from an engineering standpoint about it. I sometimes worry that I bear some responsibility for all this growth because of my role at the Beaufort Gas, Water and Sewer Authority. If I just told Del Webb, no, we're not going to serve you, or told you can't, sorry, but we did. And but I've now been working for the last 14 years to protect what we've got left, and we've had many successes, and this kind of at least dampens my guilt a little bit. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I'm open to any questions that you might have.